Hi, everybody. I want to share a few thoughts on the impact of the coronavirus. For many of us, we've never known a time where we have learned of so many people that we know who have lost their lives either through COVID or through some other cause during this period. So many individuals, so many families in our churches and in our communities who are going through grief. And it's brought the topic of death up front and center. I was watching the news the other day and they were interviewing the manager of a hospice. Her name was Karen Johnston. And she was making the point that we really need to be a lot more open about the whole topic of death and bereavement. But as she made this point, she said we tend to package up death and we hide it in a box somewhere in a peaceful setting so that we don't have to think about it. But that the coronavirus has made us think about it. And that reminded me of something that I had read not too long previous. It was a statement by John W. James, who is the founder of the Grief Recovery Institute. And he said that grief is the most off-limits topic of conversation in the English-speaking Western world. And to a great extent, he's right. We don't tend to talk about it. We don't preach about it until we have to. We don't educate about it. We don't spend a lot of time talking about it. And for something that is such an inevitability in all of our experience at some point in our lives, we don't do a lot to prepare people for it, to guide people how to navigate through the grief experience. And because we don't talk about it, there are a lot of myths and misunderstandings that develop around the topic of bereavement. And I want to take just a few moments to try and debunk at least one of those myths today. And that is the idea that there is a time limit on grief. That we will get to some point in the process where you've kind of done all that sadness thing long enough, and now we need to perk up and move on so that we can get back to normal. But that is such a fallacy because when you lose somebody who is close to you, somebody that you love dearly, it tears such a hole in your heart that there is no normal to get back to. To use the well-worn phrase, bereavement creates a new normal. C.S. Lewis said it this way. He was talking about the loss of his wife, and he likened it to an amputation. Something that he had to heal from. And then he had to adapt to so that he could walk again, to live again. You don't spend years forming an emotional bond with somebody, sometimes for a lifetime. And then when that person is no longer around, those bonds just disappear. It doesn't work like that. Those bonds are there for life. And that point came through for me recently. I was watching this program called The Repair Shop. You got a dream team of experts, craftspeople, woodworkers, metalworkers, upholsterers, experts in ceramics. And members of the public come and they bring their cherished possessions and they share the story behind these possessions. And then they leave it with these experts to repair, to fix, to restore. Well, there was one gentleman, he was a senior gentleman in his probably late 80s, maybe even early 90s. But he brought in this radio. This radio he had bought in the 1960s, and he used to listen to it with his wife, who was now deceased. They had been married for over 50 years. But now the radio was broken down, it wasn't working, it was in a terrible state, and he was hoping that they could do something with it. Anyway, they left it, came back a few days later, and then they did the big reveal. And as soon as he saw the radio in its restored condition, he just burst into tears. And they did something really special for him. They had contacted a local radio station and they arranged a dedication for him. And they played their song, their last dance song. And when he heard the music, again the tears flowed and he put his head in his hands and then he called out her name and not a dry eye in the house. It was a really touching moment. But in watching that, it really confirmed to me that you don't move on from that kind of love. Obviously, you can't love that person in the same way that you did before they passed, but you never stop loving them. And as I thought about that, it reminded me of a sermon I heard many, many moons ago. Maurice Venden preached this sermon in which he said that throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity, God will always have a space in his heart for those who are lost to the cause. And that thought blew my mind at the time. It still does. But I think it sets an example for us who are created in the image of God, that we never stop loving the people who we have loved and lost. We never stop missing them. Now, that doesn't mean that the pain is always going to be as intense as it is in the beginning. Grief is not a life sentence of heartache and sorrow and pain. It gets better. It gets easier to bear. And the reason it gets easier to bear is that we serve a God who specializes in repair. We serve a God who knows how to heal the brokenhearted. He knows how to comfort the afflicted. He knows how to be present for us in our time of need. But he also recognizes that there will be time of need. There will be those times where we are ambushed by grief, blindsided by a whole gamut of emotions, anger, confusion, sadness itself. And because we will go through those times of deep sorrow, we never outgrow our need to be reminded that weeping may endure for the night, but joy will come in the morning. So bear in mind that the God who has promised that he will never leave us nor forsake us, this is the God who will hold us through the pain. So whatever your experience has been, don't let anybody despise your grief. Whatever your experience has been, whether or not your loss is recent and raw, or whether that special place in your life has been unoccupied for many years, I pray that you will experience God's love. I pray that you will experience his peace. And I pray that you will experience the comfort of his eternal presence.